Roots of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Roots of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E. I am enjoying more and more doing these podcasts, and if you ever want to start your own podcast, using Buzzsprout as your podcast host makes it so easy because I've got a great technical support system. Now, let's get into today's podcast. My guest is Mthokozisi, Moyo. He is originally from Zimbabwe, but living and studying in South Africa. He's an environmental science PhD candidate at Witwatersrand University. In this episode, Mtho admits that he's always been a lover of science, but was unsure which field he wanted to focus on. He dabbled in different types of science in undergrad and finally settled into environmental science. Currently, his PhD research aims to understand what caused rainfall seasonality in Africa during the Miocene period. Looking at traits that are important to survive in seasonal environments, focus on plants, but not limited to plants. However, before Mtho got into his PhD studies, he took time off to work for SAEON, where he worked in science engagement, in particular with high school learners. He's very passionate about this and continues to mentor the learners. He hopes in working with the learners, he gets to impart the necessary skills and knowledge that they can use in any science career or in everyday life. Lastly, Mtho is passionate about representation in science, in particular of Black African climate change scientists, and is so proud to be part of the group that is setting trail for upcoming Black African climate change researchers. Let's take a listen to hear all about it. Hi, I'm Mthokozisi. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Anne. Nice to finally be on the show. I'm a very huge fan of the show.
Yeah, definitely. You've been here from the beginning, and I'm really excited to talk to you and to hear about, to get you onto the other side.
Yeah, you think it's nice when you're listening to others, but now you're being asked questions.
Yeah, no, don't worry. There's no pressure here. I think you know. Yeah, no. So let's just get into it. So tell us a bit about yourself, where you're from, where you're currently based, what you're doing, and your age.
Okay, so my name is Mthokozisi Moyo. I'm 26 years old. Born in Bulawayo. That's a city in Zimbabwe, then moved to South Africa at the age of 14, and I've been here for the past 12, 13 years. So I can say I call both places home. So South Africa is home to me, Zimbabwe is home to me as well. Currently doing my PhD in ecology, looking at the ecophysiological and biogeographical evidence for the onset of the wet-dry seasonality in Africa. Don't worry, I'm going to explain that a bit later, but I'm based at the University of the Witwatersrand.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, we're going to get into your research a bit later, but before we do that, you know how it goes. I just want to get to know you more away from the science. So I know you're a huge sports fan, particularly cricket and soccer or football. So in terms of football, you are a Man United fan.
Yes, so, I am. Loud and proud.
Loud and proud. So you guys, obviously with the lockdown, everybody, all the sports were frozen. All of that stopped, and I am now hearing. I'm not a soccer fan, so pardon me if I'm wrong. I heard that soccer is now back on, so I'm sure you're very excited about that.
Yes, I'm actually very, very happy that I can actually finally watch some live sport. So the other league started. I think Germany was first, but the Spanish league was playing this past weekend, so I managed to catch a few games.
Yeah.
Weekend, so I get to watch Man United once again, because it was a very difficult time during this lockdown, not having sports and all of that. Well, for us Man United fans, it was good because at least we got to go back and watch all the old games where we used to win a lot of things. Currently struggling at the moment, but we'll get back. It's all right. And also, it's other sports are slowly coming back as well. Because I don't just watch football, watch other sports as well. So there was rugby also this past weekend. Cricket, there was an announcement earlier today that there's going to be a game sometime in June. So seems like sports are coming back. So everything is good for me.
Fantastic. I love it. I think not only for you, but so many other people who look to sports, as that relief. Like,
yes.
Because I know some people are like die hard, Personally, I don't get it. I think my emotions would not be able to manage, like you said, like 1 minute you guys are winning, then you're not. Like, I don't have the emotions.
Well, it's like watching a movie though. Like you go through all the emotions. So it's just that our movie is live sport.
Okay, when you put it like that. But anyway, let's get back to why you're here, the science. Let's talk through how you actually got into the science. What are some of the influences that actually got you into this field? Was it something when you look back, you're like, oh my word, I always wanted to be in STEM, or did you just end up here?
Okay, so I can say I've had a very, very interesting journey. So I can say my early influences, my parents. So my dad is a life sciences teacher, and also my mom is a teacher as well. So they were very big on education. They got me to start reading, and so I started grade 1 at the age of 5. Quite amazing for most people when I tell people I was in school at the age of 5. It's actually 4 turning 5. But let's just say 5. Wow. So I was in school there. So I just went there. It was just a thing that like, okay, just go to school, because apparently I was that intelligent. I could have gone earlier, but then they just, okay, 5 hours, we'll be able to handle school. And then, I've always been interested in science. Like science is one thing that has fascinated me. I just didn't know which kind of science. I think that's where the journey becomes interesting, because I kind of went through all the motions. There was a time where I wanted to be a pilot, because, everyone thought pilots was like that job where the super smart people do. Then for the most part, though, I've always wanted to be a doctor, and specifically a neurosurgeon. That was something that fascinated me, because it's something that's complicated. I think looking back, I didn't know what a neurosurgeon was, but it just sounded cool. I can say that all changed when I had like an accident. So it was a time where I got injured and I got cut by glass. And it was quite bad accident, and I had to have an operation and all of that. And then I think that's when I realized that, you know what, I wouldn't be able to handle being a surgeon, because I just realized that I'm actually scared of blood. And I don't think I would be able to do all of that, because the injury was quite bad. And I don't think I would have been able to deal with people's injuries and all that kind of stuff that you deal with as a doctor. Because I think usually in school you have this image when you're watching like Grey's Anatomy or whatever, but then like there's the real life. When I actually saw myself injured, I was like, no, I can't do this. So then afterwards, then I think I went through a period where I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I still wanted to do science. So that's what led me to enrolling in like a BSc in first year. So BSc is general science, where I thought that maybe after that first year, then I can have a direction. So I did chemistry, I did biology, I did physics, I did maths. So basically all the science subjects, with hopes of actually finding my way there. So in second year, then that's when I decided to take chemistry and environmental science. And then going forward, second year I failed chemistry. But then I continued environmental science, and then I finished off with chemistry again, and then continued my honors in environmental science. So initially I wanted to do like something like environmental chemistry or chemical engineering. But after failing chemistry, then now the environmental chemistry became the option, because chemical engineering, I kind of lost interest. I don't want to say lost interest, but I became very discouraged to continue with that because of that setback. And then environmental chemistry was an option, but then I seemed to like the environment more than chemistry as well. Also because chemistry was quite difficult for me. I really loved it, but unfortunately it didn't love me back, which was it's a very one-sided relationship there. But I ended up pursuing an environmental science. So then after that, then when I did my honors, actually is a very interesting story during my honors. There's a particular project I wanted to do on like mining and acid mine drainage and all of that because of the chemistry link. But then now there was a deadline for us to choose our projects, and then that supervisor hadn't responded. So then I just decided to pick any project that was in the book. My friend helped me to pick any project that was in the book, and I chose a project on climate change. And that's how I actually ended up more focused on climate change studies because it was time pressure to pick a project, and I just picked the project that was available. So after my honors, I did a project, basically a long-term study of a particular place, Witwatersrand in KZN, where I was just looking at the climate record. So it was all the temperature, all the rainfall from 1904 to 2012. So literally went and not collected, but I went through all the temperature records. So looked at what was there digitally. There was a time I even went to SA Weather Service and looked at the books to take down the temperatures and rainfalls just to see if there's been any climate change. So we found that there was climate change in that particular region. So temperatures increased and rainfall decreased over that 110-year period. So then after that, for my master's then, we wanted to find out that what does that change in the climate for a particular region mean? So going forward then, that's when for my master's then I was looking at how that has influenced the growing season. So how has the growing season changed with changes in the climate? So that's what my master's project was all about. Then we found some very interesting results that the growing seasons actually increased. So then we had to think so currently writing up into a paper and all of that, trying to figure out what exactly would cause that, because we didn't expect that to happen. We also expected the growing season to be shorter. So maybe there could be other factors and all of that. So yeah, that's in short is my journey. And then after that, then I decided to take a break because I was so tired of studying. And I went to work. I worked for SAEON for 18 months. So basically, I was working in the science engagement program, working with school learners, also working with like other stakeholders as well. And I also got to be involved in some of the SAEON projects that they do. So it wasn't just the science engagement, science education side of it, but I also got involved in some of the science that was being carried out at the particular institution. And then after that, then that's when I had the strength. I realized that, okay, I can actually go and do my PhD because that I can say that's exposed me to many other things. As I realized, first and foremost, I realized that I'm not a person to be working in an office from 9 to 5. I really love sleeping. So having to be at work every day at like 7:30 or 8, that was really a challenge for me. And also, I just like the freedom that comes with being an academic, the fact that you can do stuff at your own pace, you get to do your own thing. I think that's the other reason that inspired me to actually pursue this PhD. And also the other reason why I did this PhD as well is so that at least there is representation, because I realized that there are not too many Black African climate change scientists. Because the other day I was having a conversation with my friends. We're trying to come away. She asked me if I know any climate change scientists who are Black, and we really sat down and we thought, like, it wasn't something that we didn't have names rolling off the top of our head. We really had to think about it, and that's when we realized that there's actually not too many. So that's another reason why I would like to do this, so that I can be part of that group, so that we can also have more of us in that particular field.
Wow. No, you've summarized it all very nicely. But I just want to take it back to some of the things that you've mentioned before we get into your actual PhD and what you've just mentioned now about the importance of representation, especially in your field. But you mentioned that, when you were starting your journey, you didn't quite know what you wanted to do. And I think that's very important, because sometimes you don't quite know where you want to be, but I think sometimes it's people who tend to plan their life in a very detailed manner. Like you said, that you just took your BSc in first year and did a general science. It might be a little bit intimidating, because I think sometimes you assume that you meant to know everything. Worse when you're in matric, you think you're meant to, or your 12th grade, you think you're meant to have your whole life figured out. But you raise a good point that you didn't quite know. You just knew you wanted to be here somewhere.
Yes. So actually, there's another funny story. You see, there are too many stories.
Yeah.
One time where I had to give a presentation at church. So it was like a health thing. I forgot what I was even talking about. So like when I made the slides, I put Dr. Mthokozisi Moyo, doctor without a matric certificate. And that was actually very funny because people after that started calling me professor or prof.
Oh,
and then I actually kind of forgot about that name for a while. But then now when I enrolled for this PhD, I was like, oh, wait, now I'm actually living up to that name that I was given all those years ago. Like it kind of was like, I don't know, they spoke like it into my life or something like that. But yeah, but going back to the point that you made, that most of the time I always feel like we have to have everything figured out. I feel like in matric, you don't really know enough of the world. I think sometimes it's not fair to make life decisions in matric at the age of 18 because you really don't know a lot of things at that point. And for most of these careers, we have very wrong impressions. Like I said, being a neurosurgeon, I didn't know what that entailed. But like it sounded like a cool career. So sometimes we choose our paths because it sounds cool, something that we've seen. We know someone that does it, but we don't really understand it. So I think for me, the one thing though I can say worked for me is that my parents told me that to always keep my options. High school, so grade 10, when we had to choose subjects and all of that, I had all the many different subjects which I could go into any field because I did accounting, did IT, I did physical science, and then I had life sciences as an 8th subject as well. So I could have gone in any... Yes, I did life sciences as an 8th subject, but look, I'm here doing a PhD in life science. So in that case, then it's just to keep your options open. I think you have to be more open-minded and you should be open to change. I think that's another thing I can say to people, that like you should be open to change. That as much as you may have your life planned out as well, something could change in it and you should be ready to adapt.
Yeah, and adapt you did. I mean, also kudos on the fact that you started school at the age of 6. So,
5.
What age did you... 5. So at what age did you finish school then?
So matric at the age of 6. I was in matric at 16.
Wow. Overachiever much? Oh my goodness.
Please don't say that.
No, but I mean that as a compliment. That's really something to be proud of. Okay, so here you are at the age of 16. I think you're right. Then that just explains further how you can't really know everything in terms of your future at 16. Oh my word, just thinking about the Anne of 16, it just shocks me because I am not that same person. So I'm sure even really for you, you also are not that person. But anyway, let's take it back. Let's take it back. You also mentioned that you wanted to do this PhD because you realized that you needed a lot more representation, and which is also very, very important because, you know, we are exposed to neurosurgeons and or doctors or, you know, all of these things, but we aren't exposed to Black scientists, even climate change scientists. I don't even think people know that is something, a field that you can get into. So I want you then to just give us an opportunity to know what it's all about. So let's just then get into your PhD. You said that your research works to understand what caused rainfall seasonality in Africa during the Miocene. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Am I pronouncing it right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then you look at traits focused on plants, but not limited to plants, that are important to survive in these seasonal environments. Before you tell me about your research, which you will, or maybe let me rather say, in your answer, when you explain all of this. Can you explain what the Miocene is? I'm so glad I got it right.
Okay, I'll start with that last question. So basically, if you look at the history of the Earth, right, it is broken down into different time periods. So the Miocene basically is a period between 24 million years ago and 5 million years ago. So that's what the Miocene is that particular time period. But then the world is broken down into, the history of the Earth is broken down into those many different eras. So the Miocene is just that. Okay, but now to explain
Sorry. Can you just go back? I think we missed that part to the beginning. Can you explain the different periods again? I think we missed that.
Okay, so I'm not really that good in the geological timescale and all, but basically it's broken down into like the Quaternary, the Tertiary period, Cretaceous, and Jurassic. Then the Miocene is under the Tertiary period, so it's between 24 and 5 million years ago. And we're currently living in the Holocene. I don't know if you've heard about the Anthropocene, which is like the future.
I have never heard of these terms. I am learning right now.
So basically, just think of it as a time period. So it's a time period, so 24 million years ago to 5 million years ago. Let me put it this way. It's like saying the people born in the 60s or the 90s or 2000s. But think about it in a bigger geological timescale, like on a much larger scale now, millions of years.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, go on. Please let us know what you are actually doing.
Okay, so with this PhD, like I said at the beginning, that long title that I gave, Ecophysiological and Biogeographical Evidence for the Onset of Wet Dry Seasonality in Africa, the main thing that we're trying to figure out here is that seasonality is so we all know that we have the rainy season, so usually November, December for us, and then maybe in Cape Town it's like June, July, they're currently in the rainy season. So we know that plants and everything controlled by seasonality, so many things that are controlled by seasonality. So what we're trying to figure out is, when did this actually happen? Because if we go to the literature and study what happened in the past, it seems like the climate just used to be very wet. There was no seasonal system, so it's just wet, and also the plants that were there at that time were a reflection of that. And then there was a point where the earth started drying up, and then there was this seasonal cycle, and the introduction of seasonal cycle also led to certain plants emerging in the earth. So that's when you had a spread of grasslands, and also that influenced the animals that were found in there. So things like dinosaurs went extinct, but then that's when you had some of the other animals as well coming through that we have currently right now. So broken down into, I can say, three main objectives that we have. So the first one, right, starting with currently, so stuff that's happening in the world now, we're going to describe the spatial patterns and functional traits associated with seasonality in the present day. So basically what we're doing here, we're trying to see is, in Africa, where is seasonality important? So we're going to have like a seasonality map. So using different measures of seasonality, we're trying to determine which one is going to be the best one to use. But basically, we're trying to see where is seasonality important. So that's for most of Africa. The only place in Africa that doesn't have much seasonality is there in the rainforest, where it rains pretty much all year round. But the rest of Africa, there's a time where there's a rainy season, time where there's a dry season. So that's the first part. And then the next part that we need to do is identify what traits are important for you to survive in a seasonal environment. So if we look at trees, for example, you know that in winter, they drop their leaves to be able to cope with less water. So those are the kinds of traits that we're looking at, that like we also maybe will investigate how do evergreen trees live in a dry place. So that's also another one of the traits. There are also many other traits. Like I said, they're not limited to plants and animals. And if there are any experts on any plant or animal, please feel free to reach out to me, because we're going to have a workshop very soon where we're going to be discussing some of these things. So for example, one example I can think of is like in snakes. There are snakes that survive in seasonal systems that have scales or their scales are arranged in a certain way if they're in a seasonal system compared to when they're in a non-seasonal system, or where you find certain herbivores in a seasonal system and certain herbivores you only find them in a seasonal system. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking at. So that's the first objective, the one that speaks about the traits. And then now we're going to go back now to the fossil record. So that's when we're now looking at the Miocene stuff to see, okay, if we have these particular traits, so when exactly did they evolve? So we're assuming that it happened during the Miocene because most of the literature points to that. But then we have to test that now looking at the past. So these are kinds of studies that have been done in other continents, but no one has really studied it in Africa. So this is probably one of the first studies of this kind in Africa. And then we're going to look at those fossil records and try and see how those traits evolved and which species were important. And then after that, then now we're going to create like a model to say which feedbacks or land atmosphere feedbacks are important to control seasonal rainfall in Africa. I think I summarized that. There's a whole lot more, but I think that's a short summary.
Okay, no, it sounds like it's a very encompassing project, which sounds very interesting. So now to somebody who's listening that you are doing all of this, right? The question is, why is it so important? Why do you guys need to look at the past and study all of this information? How is this going to be relevant to the people now and also in the future?
Okay, so the most important thing is we're looking at climate change that we're having or that we all know about. The world is going to change. So if we understand how these traits could have a decrease in carbon dioxide concentration in the past, for example, or decrease in rainfall in the past, which led to certain species becoming extinct. If we understand those relationships, and also like I spoke about now that we're going to create a model that models seasonality to see what traits are important and which relationships are important, then we'll be able to predict what could happen in the future if the climate change continues, because it seems like we could go back to a world that was similar to what was there all those millions of years ago. So maybe some of the species that we have currently will be extinct, or maybe the species will adapt. We don't know, but it's just to have this background information so that people could be able to answer some of these kinds of questions.
Wow, that's interesting. But yeah, I think, like you always say, you have to understand the past to know, to understand the future, and that's very interesting, particularly in conjunction with what's going on with climate change. So this is all very interesting research, and what you're doing sounds very fascinating. And we spoke earlier that you started school early, you finished school early, but you also mentioned something important, that you had a point where you initially wanted to do environmental chemistry. So all of this wouldn't have happened if I can actually blatantly say that you didn't fail your chemistry module in the year that you did, right? And that this is very important because, you know, when people assume, like you said, that you are a PhD student, they just assume, or doctor or prof, they think, oh my word, he knows everything, right? Like, you must be really smart. So how did you, at that point of your life, deal with that failure, and also going forward now, because the academic field has a lot of times where you fail. So how do you deal with failure, and how do you overcome it?
Okay, so it was a very difficult point in my life, because you see, if you've been the smart kid, top student, you've never failed in your life. Like, all the time, you've always gotten good marks most of the time. And this is really a setback, because that's when you actually start doubting yourself, because you don't know how it feels. You don't know how to deal with it. Don't I know what I'm doing? Am I really supposed to be in this field? Do I really fit in here? That's when you start questioning yourself, that like you tried your best. Because the thing is, I think the one thing I learned, that in varsity, right, you can study and cross nights and sleep in the library and do all those things and still fail. And I think that was one of the biggest things that I studied. I did all of those things. I worked hard, but I still failed. And I realized that maybe the way I had been studying, so most of the time, I think in high school, you realize that if you just study the book the way it is, the exam, you're going to pass. But then now I realized that I wasn't really studying to understand things. I was more trying to cram and all of that. And then if you forget one thing when you're cramming, then the whole thing just falls apart. So I can say that setback actually taught me. So I learned how to study more effectively to be able to understand the work instead of just like knowing the work just to pass. And then also I can say opened doors for me because when I was redoing my second year chemistry, that's when I did third year environmental science, and I got to learn more about that particular field because I wouldn't have been able to do like a chemistry. If I had continued, I wouldn't be able to do like applied chemistry, and environmental science. I would have had to choose between those three, two of those three. But then at the end, I ended up doing those three because of that particular setback. So I can say in this case, the setback really worked for me because it gave me an extra year to sort out my life, basically to learn how to study, and to also be able to do something that was different in the following year. So I also got to do applied chemistry, which also introduced me to other aspects, which I'm even using even now. So I think everything worked out for me in the end. But in terms of setbacks and how you deal with that, it's crushing at first, yes. But I think you have to make sure that you go through, allow yourself to feel that. Biggest thing that made me relax, the fact that my parents were not disappointed in me, because that was my biggest fear, that no, I've let them down. Why did I fail and all of that? But then they were just very supportive. They're like, you know what, these things happen. Just pick yourself up. You'll be able to do this. It's fine. We support you. We're here with you. And that in itself lifted a whole burden off my shoulders. So I think that's something as well that is very important. The support system that you have around you is another thing that can help you get through all these kinds of failures.
Yeah, that's very true. I think sometimes you put so much pressure on yourself, whereas when you, like you said, if you've never failed before, and having a support system is important, and your family being that support system is even more important. So I know that but some people lack that family support system, and that's why, and they look to others. And I know that you said that during your break, when you took a break from your studies after your master's, before you entered your PhD program, you worked somewhere else, and currently you are mentoring some matric students that you met at that previous job. So tell me more about this work, and how do you think that mentoring, what you're doing is, how do you think that is like important for people? Why do you think that is important? Apologies.
Okay, so when I was working for the SAEON, so South African Environmental Observation Network. They have a science engagement program, so basically science education, where we get to work with learners from previously disadvantaged, basically teach them science. So we get to do field work and all those. And then what you realize in these kinds of programs is that if you're coming from a good school, so like I went to what you would classify as a good school, where we had labs and all of those things, which is something like we took for granted as well. But then when you actually go out there and you realize that there are people who don't have these kinds of facilities, and the people who are looking for this kind of information, then that was really a very great experience for me. I think that also helped me to become a better person, because I got to see life from the other side. Because the thing is, most of the time you think you can relate, but up until you see people in that situation, then you realize that you are in a very privileged background. And that's also another reason that motivated me to actually continue mentoring these students. So I worked with them for a year and a half, and it's really interesting because they don't really have these kinds of opportunities like our climate change scientists. They don't know about these other careers. I think most people just know about the traditional careers like doctors, lawyers, and all of that. But then there are also these other careers as well that you can enter into, which I think that exposing them to these careers as well is also going to help them to be able to make a career choice. Because like I said, not everyone is going to have the kinds of options which I had, because I can say I was lucky enough to have all these kinds of options, but not everyone's going to have those kinds of options. So you have to try and guide them early as they are starting, so that at least they have a direction. Because that's the one thing I realized, that when I got to varsity, there are some people who had a clear direction of what they wanted. And for some of us, we kind of found ourselves here by accident. So if you can mentor them at a young age, and not necessarily for them to be climate change scientists or whatever else, I think the most important thing, like with this mentorship program that I'm trying to work on, is to try and also give them necessary skills which they'll be able to use in whatever field they decide to pursue. So things like computer skills, how to write, how to speak. Those are some of the things that we used to do with them as well. So it's skills that they'll also be able to use, even if they decide not to do science, but that they can use in their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, wow, that's fantastic. I commend you for the work that you're doing. And like you said, that you exposing people to these other opportunities, be it in science or even non-science, actually opens so many eyes. Because sometimes you get to varsity and we get told, okay, finish school, get to varsity, and then you're like, okay, what am I gonna do there? And it's really, really hard. So starting from a young age and getting people exposed and mentoring them actually saves a lot of time and wasted money instead of being in varsity for like a long time trying to figure out like, oh, this is not for me. This is not for me. And even like you said, this links with the showing people, having representation, that look at me, I'm a Black climate scientist, and this is what I'm doing, and this is where you can be. Because it's very hard to dream something that you've never seen, to aspire to be someone that you didn't even know exist. So having
end up wanting to be doctors. I was saying this is why maybe we end up wanting to be doctors and nurses and all of that, because these are people we see in our communities, and sometimes we never see all these other professions, so to say.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why what you're doing is very important. And this has been a great chat. But just to close off, what advice would you give to somebody who, like yourself, has had a little bit of undecisiveness in terms of not knowing what they want to do, failed a little bit, or just generally somebody who wants to get into STEM or even into your field particularly?
Okay, so the piece of advice I have, like I said, try and find someone to help you in whatever you do. So try and build a support system. It may not be your family, but if your family is the first support system that you have, make sure that your support system is good. But then also try and look for mentors as well. Try and look for people who will be able to help you. So always be willing to learn from others. Always be willing to reach out and ask questions, because most of the time people are scared of asking questions, but always be willing to ask questions. And then also the other thing is, once you decide on what you want to do, be persistent in it, even though there may be barriers in front of you. Because, for example, I wanted to do my honors, but then there was a serious challenge because of the barriers that were set in front of me. First and foremost, funding is a very huge issue for most postgrads. I know that, like, when we're talking here, we never really met. And also there's certain things that happen in institutions as well. So I don't know if you heard about the recent thing that happened at UCT, where they were speaking about how Black students don't pursue biological sciences. And those are some of the challenges that you come across. So things like racism as well, there's something that you come across. But you have to try and, not focus on those issues, because those issues are very important, but you really have to be persistent and be able to fight those issues. And then if you have people around you who can help you, to anyone who's listening, you can also speak to me. I've been down this road. I would be willing to listen to your stories as well, to hear how you fight these kinds of situations. There are many people that have broken ground for all of us to be able to be where we are. So then most of those people are always willing to be able to help. So try and reach out, try and ask the right. I think that's the thing that most people are scared of asking questions. I think if you ask questions, then you would be able to get answers, and there's so many people really willing to help.
Yeah, that's very good advice. Solid. Because you have not because you ask not. So that's simply how I see it. Sometimes if you don't ask for things, you probably won't get it. And like you said, so many people are willing to help people. I think that's something that I've also learned recently, that if you just ask people, they're more than willing to say. Usually they say yes, or if not, they say not now. So there'll probably be a time where maybe they're a bit busy, but they'll be like, not now, later. So
they can link you to someone else as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's another important thing. So, it's been great chatting with you. I enjoyed our chat, having you on the other side.
Hopefully I did well.
No, you did well. And thank you for just being so open and honest and sharing your journey with us. And to everybody else who's listening, thank you once again for tuning in to another episode Sure.
And thank you for having me on the show. I really, really enjoyed this. And thank you for this platform where we get to learn from many different people and learn from their experience.
Oh, thank you so much.
Who's gone through all of these things. So thank you very much as well for having this.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you. But to everybody else, like I was saying, thank you for tuning in. As always, it's always great to have people listening. And if you are a listener and you're also listening, you're like, oh my word, Anne, I'd love to get on. You are more than willing to just contact me and hit me up. Or I would love to connect and to hear your stories. But for now, thank you for listening. And this is your girl, Anne, with an E. Until next time, bye.